Story 1. Haunted Military Base. I was stationed in Germany. The barracks we lived in were very old. There was an etching on the bricks outside my window that dated the building to 1883. I lived on the 3rd floor. My office was in the basement. I was told they were once stables, and I believe this because you could see hinges still embedded in the rocks. My job was to process unclassified military correspondence. This included faxes that came in. I went to work at 4 a.m. I'd pick up the messages at the message center, process them for delivery. On one night there was a party going on upstairs, and I was invited. I had to go to work at 4, so I didn't go. The inside doors to the basement were metal doors that were usually locked with a chain. I don't usually lock them when I'm at work. But if there's a party going on, sometimes it's wise. It keeps me from being disturbed. I'm sitting there, going through a pile of messages, and suddenly I hear the door open. That is, I heard the subtle sound of hinges squeak. I figured that was someone coming down to bother me, since I was a working stiff that night. You know how people say that they can feel somebody coming, even if they can't see them or hear them yet? Well, that was the case here. I stopped working and was looking at the door. So when they got to the door, I was prepared for them to jump around the corner and scare me. I waited and waited, and no one came around the corner. So I got up to see what was going on. I looked around the corner and saw that I had locked the door, that the padlock chain was on my side, and no one could have got in without me unlocking the door for them. And then I got the smell of hay drifting on the air. When everyone came back into work the next morning, they could tell that I was visibly shaken. And it still kind of spooks me to this day. Story 2. Grandmother. When I was a senior in high school, my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, and she moved to our town to get treatment. She stayed in our home for a while until she moved into hospice. A few years after her passing, I was working as a carry-out clerk at a local grocery store chain. It's my summer off from college. One day I was sacking an order. I looked up and saw a woman waiting for her groceries. She was several stands in front of me. She resembled my grandmother. Her body, her hair, her mannerisms. I kept glancing right at her. And right before she left, I finally caught her profile. It really looked like my grandmother. I hurried sacking my order so I could get outside, so I could see her face more clearly before she left. As I approached the big glass windows, right before the door to go out, I saw her driving off in her car. She looked right at me and smiled. I swear it was my grandmother. I knew it couldn't be, because I didn't really believe in those things. When I got back inside, I got a big chill, like someone had dumped ice water on me. And then I realized that this day was the exact anniversary of my grandmother's passing. I truly believed that she was visiting me, and I've never seen that woman again. Story 3. My grandmother's visit. Back in the late 70s, I was 5 years old, and I required surgery for a hearing problem I had developed. The morning I was to have the surgery, my parents were at home with my younger brother. He was only a year old at the time. My grandmother was at the hospital with me. She accompanied me from my room into the pre-op room, where I was to wait until the sedatives I'd been given kicked in. I remember laying on the gurney thinking, I feel so wide awake and alert. I'm supposed to be falling asleep for surgery. I looked at my grandmother and said, how am I going to fall asleep? And she said, just close your eyes. You'll be fine. So I did, and that was the last thing I remembered. It's not an overly exciting thing that happened, but it's one of those memories that's always carried with me. Flash forward to my 26th birthday. My parents took me out, and during the dinner, I began recalling some of my earliest childhood memories. I told my parents the story of my hospital visit, which apparently I had never done before, and my memories of my grandmother being with me the morning of my surgery, and how she told me to just close my eyes and I'll be fine. My mother looked at me with a frozen, blank stare for a second, and then she said, your grandmother wasn't at the hospital with you that morning. She was at home with us and your brother. I said, no. She was in the room with me, and she was in the pre-op with me. She told me to just close my eyes. And Mom said, no, Grandma was with us that morning. The hospital called and told us that you'd be going into surgery that morning, and we realized that we didn't have time to get there to see you. When we told your grandmother, she was distraught. She panicked. She said, he was just a little boy. Someone needs to be there with him. You can't let him go in alone. I don't know how, but some way my grandmother found a way to be with me, yet somehow never leave the house with my parents. A grandmother's love is strong. Story 4. The Visitor. From the time I was 15 until I was 19, I had a demonic visitor. I would have a dream where I was laying in bed, but I could sense an evil presence in the room. When I woke up, I could still feel the presence right next to my bed. I would pretend to be asleep in hopes that it would just go away. This stems from my childhood, where I figured that if you pretend to be asleep, the monsters would get discouraged and just go away. Instead, it would gently poke my hair and sometimes touch my cheek, and then the presence would fade away. The room would be bone-chillingly cold while the demon was there. And when I was touched, it felt so cold it burned. Nothing ever happened beyond that. But the presence itself terrified me. Deep down, I know that if I had reacted in any way, the demon would have taken that as an invitation, and who knows what would have happened. If it had been a friendly presence, a spirit or an angel, I would have had the same feeling of terror that I did. About 5 years after the last incident in my bedroom, I was briefly tormented by the demon again. I was going through a divorce. I was under a lot of stress. I was about to have a mental breakdown. I don't remember much about that night, but I do remember laying on my couch, under a blanket, shivering, and crying. It was so cold I couldn't warm up, but my body was sweating from the covers. It felt like my whole body was being stabbed by icicles. For about 20 or 30 minutes, I prayed and demanded that the evil leave my presence. Finally, I warmed up, but the stabbing pain took a couple days to go away, as if I was actually stabbed with a sharp object. I haven't had another visitation since then, but I know that it's God's presence protecting me. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, hit that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and drop me a comment down below. I'd love hearing from you. Bye!